ゴジラが近づいております。警備隊の指示に従って避難してください。
We are getting some truly extraordinary live images here in the studio.
Approximately 7 hours ago, something attacked the city. I don't know what it is.
Welcome to Tokyo Lives, a Giant Monsters podcast where the hosts truly believe that something will rise from the ocean and destroy us all. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Coleman.
Alright, tonight our main topic is War of the Gargantuas, which I stated last week that I had never seen. I watched it last night, and I have opinions on it.
I also have opinions.
So we'll be getting into that shortly, but first we got a couple news items that we wanted to talk about. Coleman, lead us off.
Well, the biggest news of the night is what I'm sure everyone's waiting on pins and needles for, which is the winner of the last week's Versus episode.
Or should we say lack of winner?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Uh-huh.
Here's what it's going to come down to. So, if you did not listen to episode 4, we started a new format episode that was called Versus, and we did stop motion versus suitmation, the classic special effects techniques that have been a huge part of the giant monster film genre since the beginning. I mean, it's what started it. It's how they pulled off these giant monsters to begin with. So if you listened to last week's episode, we went head to head, we battled it out, we tried to figure out a winner. And we didn't leave it up to us. It wasn't up to us to decide the winner. We left it up to you guys, the listeners.
Correct.
And we had some people fighting. We had some great comments. And I want to read a few excerpts real quick from some of the best comments. So this is James Arledge. We've mentioned him on the show before. He's been a Twitter follower who jumped on over to our website and commented. He says, my vote is for stop motion, but I want to say in general, I enjoy suitmation more. I agree that motion capture is the evolution of suitmation, but I also agree that CG is the evolution of stop motion. The differences in my eyes is that CG became a staple in the movie industry, where motion capture became a component. That is why suitmation is still around. It is a perfectly viable technique, but it hasn't fully evolved into anything that can stand alone like stop motion has. So he voted for stop motion because of what it evolved into and how much impact that made on the industry.
Except, James Arledge, I would have to disagree with you in the sense of, you know, I spoke at the final arguments of last week that suitmation is still being used in films today. So having said it hasn't fully evolved into anything that can stand alone, you know, it is. So
he actually has a rebuttal for what you just said. I wasn't going to read his whole comment, but he just refuted your little argument right there. He says, to find the winner of this versus match, we must look to the future. CG is in almost every movie today. So is motion capture, but only under the cover of CG. Stop motion not only evolved into CG, but also absorbed stop motion, leaving suitmation in the dust and back to its roots. So yes, suitmation is still around, but only because it can't seem to get with the times and turn into something that can stand alone and compete with stop motion / CG. The winner is clearly stop motion. Mm-hmm. P.S. I still love you, suitmation.
Okay. All right. So once again, that's one vote for suitmation, or stop motion, sorry.
Okay, here we have a suitmation vote, which this is great because this guy actually commented in the original teaser post for this episode.
Yeah.
And he changed his mind after our arguments. So that's great. Unfortunately, he changed his mind in the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
In the pre-episode post, I said I'd give it to stop motion, but some points were raised I didn't really think about. I was stuck in a giant monster mindset, so I excluded films like Alien or Predator, which were brought up. I also have to piggyback on Cameron's point of scale, which that's another commenter. Average human-sized or smaller creatures are much more easily obtained without the need of tampering with scale. His ending argument is, while I'd still agree stop motion holds the trophy for allowing more varied creature design, I think suitmation's trophy for varied practical use wins out. Whether it's Godzilla, Xenomorphs, or Ewoks, suitmotion does it with relative ease, and I'll give my vote for that reason.
Yep.
So that's a pretty good comment.
Yeah, I really liked that comment. Just because, like, it was very interesting to see, like, that he changed his mind because of stuff that we brought up in the episode.
That was
really
user fluff
yes.
On the comment section of the episode.
Correct.
And then we have Cameron, who he settled on... He's got a great ending line. I got to read this. So he settled on suitmation. This is how he comes to it. He said, I've been thinking about this all day, and I think I've reached a decision. Stop motion is important to the development of our beloved medium of beasts and baddies, true. Ray Harryhausen's Beast from 20,000 Fathoms established a lot of the early tropes, and stop motion animation gave us classics from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad to Ghostbusters. But with a few exceptions, these creatures and these features are short, little. I mean, Calabos is what, 6 or 7 feet? Here we deal in nothing under 20 meters. For something that big, you can use stop motion. I vote for Takusatsu. I vote for suit actors. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's very...
Very eloquently put. Yeah. Last comment comes from I Am Gibbon. And he says, for the record, the God of War game series makes constant reference to, and actually includes characters from, and in some cases serves as sort of a shared universe sequels to some of the old Harryhausen films, specifically Clash of the Titans and Jason and the Argonauts. They've said in many interviews that Harryhausen films inspired the God of War series in the first place as a sort of, how would we do this sort of thing today? More specifically, they brought Harry Hamlin back to play Perseus in God of War 2, clashing with Kratos in an effort to get the Fates to bring Andromeda back to life. Anyway, so jumping to his vote. Oh, and I guess I'm voting for stop motion. I just love it too much. It can do a lot more than suits can, even if it does look jerky. Something about an obvious man in a suit just takes me out of things, and even if it does have its own certain charm.
Yep.
Great podcast. Looking forward to more.
Yep, so we're all tied up, it seems.
We
got
are.
2 and 2, so... Unfortunately, I mean, you know, I'm sure that, you know, we'll probably still get some votes as new people start listening.
No. I'm going to issue a challenge.
Oh, no. What's the challenge?
And I'll only issue this challenge if you accept this right now here on the air.
Okay.
The next comment that goes down on our website, TokyoLivesPodcast.com, the next comment that votes on the episode comment section for episode 4, stop motion versus suitmation, decides the winner.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. So
I mean, you know,
I don't like a tie. I don't like a tie.
Yeah, you don't like a tie. I'm perfectly fine with it being a tie because as much as I was fighting against stop motion, I do still love it. So
I love both too,
you know,
but again, I don't want to be Batman versus Superman. I want a winner.
Yeah. All right.
I want a winner of this, and so here we go. Next comment, next person to log into our website, TokyoLivesPodcast.com. It uses discuss for the comments section. So if you already have an account, great, or just jump in there and create one real quick. Next comment, under the episode 4 stop motion versus suitmation episode posting on the episodes page, decides the winner.
I will put a stipulation on this. If it seems like the vote did not listen to our episode, I don't think it should count.
Okay.
Because I feel like, we changed a mind during the argument, and it changed to my side, but there is possible one that might be voting for me that listened to the episode and believes more of what you were saying. So I just think that, if it seems like they're really not listening to the episode and they just go on there to vote, we should wait until we get one that actually brings up some points, I think.
Sure. Someone who has a well-thought argument that references our episode, that'll be the vote that counts.
Yep.
If you just jump on there and it's one line that says, I love stop motion, we're not going to count.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're waiting for that last comment. We'll probably, hopefully we'll get a comment before next episode, and then we can officially announce the winner. But for now, let's move on to some actual outside of the podcast news.
Sure, and I don't think this will happen with every Versus episode. I think this is rare.
Yeah,
that we would get 2 and 2.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think some of the more divisive podcast episodes. It may end up being a tie. You never know. But we'll see when we get there. So the first piece of news that we wanted to talk about is a little piece from the comic book world. We posted on the website a few days ago, and it looks like Marvel has created their own kaiju to show up in the new Marvel universe that they just rebooted.
I saw this news article posted, I think on Comic Book News or somewhere else, but it was just linked to me by someone else who knows that we do a kaiju or a giant monster podcast.
Yep.
And I read the article, and I was really excited at first. I thought this was really neat. And I actually saw the screenshots, and just my heart dropped. So here's the story. So Marvel has a series called New Avengers, which is like a soft reboot of the Avengers. They still have the normal Avengers comic going, but the New Avengers is about to hit, I think, comic number 9, and that's where this kaiju is going to debut. And his name is literally American Kaiju. That's what they're calling him. And he is the evolved form of a military personnel named Todd Ziller.
You see what they did there?
If you get that reference. So he's very Godzilla looking. Mm-hmm. I would say he's like if you mix Godzilla and Doomsday from the Superman franchise.
Yeah.
He's got spikes, but they're very rocky, and they're coming out of everywhere. They're not just along his back. And he's a little more slender, a little more elongated, a little longer of a neck than Godzilla. Not completely upright, kind of hunched over and leaning forward.
Yeah.
And I actually really like the look of him. I mean, from what I just said, you would think that this is where I have a problem. But I don't. His look, I mean, it's similar to Godzilla, but I think it's unique enough that I could get really excited about this. Except for the fact that, for some reason, he has the American flag emblazoned, and this is in giant monster form. He has the American flag emblazoned from neck to belly to chest, like all down his bottom, to I assume his legs and everything. It's just this huge American flag. And then, I mean, maybe that would kind of be something or whatever, but he's also got a tiny American flag just stamped in between his eyes on his forehead. And I just don't, I thought at first, like, oh, okay, maybe this soldier had tattoos and they grew, and that'd be kind of a cool idea. Except the picture of the soldier, he doesn't have any tattoos.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I think there's a way they could do this, kind of, that wouldn't have been very silly and goofy. I just don't know what they were thinking. I think my comparison was I think it would be cool if the military has made this giant monster, and it's apparently their answer to super science, so like the Fantastic Four and all these superheroes doing crazy science and making robots and whatever. If they would have had it emblazoned with like you'd see on the side of a tank, like numbers and like the Navy's seal. And just different quadrants of the army or something, emblazoned across it, like it looked like something the army or navy would have actually put out.
Yeah,
just happens to be a biological creature that's 100 meters tall. That would have been really cool. I think that would have been really neat. But instead, they just threw some flags on it and threw it out to sea. So kind of weird, Marvel. Kind of weird.
It is a little strange. I mean, I think that. It is a very interesting design. Like you said, it's like a weird cross between Godzilla and Doomsday. I'm excited to see what they do with it. I'm kind of curious to see if it is just going to be like a one-off thing. Like, is it literally just going to show up for this first issue or the 9th issue of New Avengers and then be dealt with and gone? Or is this going to be like a recurring new villain for Marvel?
I think just like every comic book character, it's all about the popularity of that issue and if people scream for it. I mean, he could get his own series if people like him as much as Daredevil.
Yeah.
But it just depends on what people say. And I think there's already some initial backlash from the thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, the American flag stuff is pretty silly looking. I'm really not sure what to think about it. I definitely will be picking up that issue or at least checking it out. Just to see, what is this thing? I mean,
maybe it's just all a metaphor, and he's coming across the sea to come in and rumble and make New York great again. Maybe it's just a parallel to modern politics.
I see what you did there. Yeah. We'll see. It's just a very interesting little tidbit of news to come out of the Marvel camp.
Yeah. Speaking of comics, I didn't say we were going to bring this up, but a brand new Godzilla comic did drop today.
It did. It's called Godzilla Oblivion. And it is, the plot, from what I understand, is basically a world that does not have giant monsters like our own. They create a device that opens up a portal to another dimension where the world has been completely decimated by giant monsters. And Godzilla comes through the portal and stuff goes down from there. It sounds really cool. Like, it sounds like a cool, sci-fi story with giant monsters in it, specifically Godzilla. I'm excited about it. I'm probably going to pick it up this weekend and, start reading it, see what's up. I mean, IDW has had really good, Godzilla comics. They've also had some subpar. Rulers of Earth was fantastic, which I'm sure we'll talk about at a later date. But I'm just curious to see what they're going to do with this little miniseries. They don't have an ongoing comic right now, so I'm curious to see, is this going to spin off into a new complete series, or are they just going to keep doing little miniseries like this and Godzilla in Hell and all the other ones that they've done?
I mean, I haven't read a lot of Godzilla comics. I actually was in a comic book shop the other day and picked a few up, and I think the problem I have with them, and again, I didn't go in depth, so who am I to say? But I looked at Rulers of Earth, and it looked pretty cool. I mean, I saw the panel that had the team up of the Mecha Godzillas and stuff, but they don't seem like they're super interested in telling like a new take on Godzilla or any kind of new story. They look like they just want to run through the gamut of villains. Like I looked at like multiple series, and it looked like all of them kind of just like threw monsters at Godzilla. It's almost like the ending battles of like Final Wars, where he's just going through the characters from his series and over and over again. I don't know. I mean, there's obviously more meat there, and there's some humans doing some things, but I just from reading a few panels and jumping around a bit, it didn't seem like there were any Godzilla comics that really caught my eye. But I'd love some suggestions from the fans.
Yeah, I mean, Rulers of Earth is actually probably the best one of their ongoings. I mean, there was Half Century War, which was amazing. Like, that is a very unique Godzilla story. Mm-hmm. It jumps around with the same characters over 50 years. So it starts with them running into Godzilla for the first time. And then, like, it jumps 10 years, and then it jumps 10 years, then it jumps 10 years, and it jumps 10 years. So it's just really, that is a really well-told story. Rulers of Earth it is definitely more there for just, like, matchups of monsters that we've never seen fight on the screen before. Like, there is a Godzilla versus Sonda and Gyra fight for, relating to this episode.
Really?
That's really actually kind of cool. Yeah. And then, I mentioned it in the G98 episode a couple, weeks back, but, Zilla appears, and there's a big battle between Godzilla and Zilla, and it's definitely different than how Final Wars played it out. Zilla doesn't just get knocked out in the first 2 seconds. So the Rulers of Earth is pretty much all about just those matchups that we've never seen. Space Godzilla shows up and fights some different monsters that we've never seen him interact with before with. So it's good for that. I might
check that out then, because again, I was almost sold just on the I'm a big Mecha Godzilla fan. Yeah, it's probably my favorite Godzilla enemy, and the fact that it had the 3 different versions teaming up, or I think it had all 4. Teaming up to fight him.
There's a lot of cool stuff that happens in Rulers of Earth. But anyway, that came out in stores today. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to look at it, see what's going on. But Godzilla is still alive and well in the comics, which is always a good thing. So
just him being alive in media.
In general. Yeah.
It's great. Looking at you, Godzilla Resurgence.
All right.
Moving on. We're not going to talk about that this week. So the next bit of news is near and dear to my heart, I would say. Universal Studios Orlando is starting to ramp up some media associated with their new King Kong ride. Yeah. It's called Skull Island Reign of Kong. Sounds super similar to... as far as title-wise, it sounds super similar to an upcoming King Kong movie, wouldn't you say? You say it's pretty similar?
Yeah, it's definitely pretty similar. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with the new movie.
Like, absolutely nothing. And, that wouldn't be too bad, but it's weird. So, I just wanted to, real quick, go into some like I said, near and dear to my heart memories of the old King Kong ride. If you've ever been to Universal between the years of, I don't know when it was built, probably 1985 to 1990. I'm not sure. That's probably completely wrong. But the old King Kong ride is based off the 1976 American King Kong. And it has that flavor of animatronics and like large scale theme park attraction. To the point where you walk into this ride. And I rode this ride when I was 5 and 6 probably. And it is still one of my most vivid memories. So you walk into this lobby, and it's this big white lobby, and it has like the full Kong animatronic, like not one moving, but just sitting in the lobby against a wall. Yeah. And like you can go up and take pictures with it. And again, it might not have been full size, but to my 5-year-old mind, I'm pretty sure it was close to full size.
Yeah.
So the line for this ride was actually like a parking garage. And you would go from each level to level up, and all you could see is like the cityscape. And they built like an entire city for this ride.
Right.
I mean, it was amazing. And there were like fires off the distance. You could hear like dogs barking. It was really scary. And so you go up this parking garage, and finally you get to the top part, and there's like a train station. And when you get there, you get on this tram, and it's like a suspended tram that hangs. And you go through the city, and you hear that like King Kong is attacking. You kind of see him off in the distance, and he's fighting, doing stuff. And I don't remember the specifics of the ride in the middle part or at the beginning, but the thing that you don't forget is when you're 5 years old, you're up against the window, which the window had no glass. You're right beside the window, and you turn a corner out of this, like you're blocked by this building. You turn a corner, and the rail or the suspension wire that your tram is on is being held in this life-size Kong animatronic hand.
Yeah.
And he's staring you down like he's messed up the track, and you're on it, and you're getting right towards him. And when you get to him, he picks up your tram car and looks right into it. Like his teeth are right beside the window.
Yeah.
That 5-year-old Coleman is staring outside of, screaming at the top of his lungs. It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying and amazing and incredible. And like again, I said, one of my clearest memories being on that ride.
Yeah.
And it was really amazing. We went back several times, but I was still really young. And that eventually, I think I want to say like 10 or 11 years ago is they finally took it down, and the original one in Hollywood actually burned to the ground.
Yeah.
So
the one in Orlando is the one that they actually took to the ground. Just actually took down to replace with the Mummy ride, I believe.
The Mummy Returns ride, which is awesome.
No, yeah, it's a good ride, but anyway.
So the whole point of the story is that we have a new Kong ride,
right?
And so far, it looks like they're doing like revolutionary things with the truck that you're in. It's not on a track. It's on Skull Island, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I assume it's going to be a lot like the Harry Potter ride, where it's going to be a mix of screens and animatronics and just things to try to immerse you, which on the Harry Potter ride looks amazing and is incredibly fun. It's a really, really cool like way to be innovative, like the Spider-Man ride, but not go too crazy with it.
Yeah, I feel like I was there last summer, and I feel like it's what it sounds like is it's going to be a combination of the Transformers ride that's currently there, plus the Harry Potter like ride. As far as like the animatronics are going to be there, so it's more like that side of it's the Harry Potter ride, but the way the cart moves and stuff is going to be very much like the Transformers ride.
Sure.
So it sounds really interesting. But
what baffles me, what is just blows my mind, is that it's completely 100% set in Peter Jackson's King Kong.
Yep.
I mean, they've got this new movie coming out. I know you can't really like build the ride and show promotional materials for it before like the movie would come out, but still, I don't understand why they're just coming out with this ride. That's going to be, and I know they have the Hollywood version, and that's the Peter Jackson Kong.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to use elements of that and just bring the technology over and some of the video that's already been made.
Yeah.
But still, right before you're about to start a brand new Kong franchise, that's going to be completely different.
See, here's what you're forgetting. And I wanted to mention this to you earlier when we were talking about it, but you're forgetting that Universal is not producing this Kong movie that is coming out for next year.
Oh, that's a really good point.
It's Warner Brothers and Legendary. So technically, I think the rights issue would come up. It's the same.
Oh, well, then they wouldn't be able to do it at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same reason why in the ending sequence at Universal, whenever they do the fireworks and stuff, they show the Incredible Hulk clips, because technically that was made under Universal, so technically they have the rights to that movie. So they can actually they can use clips from it.
Take away my entire argument. This is actually really smart to cash in on Kong right before a new movie.
I think it's smart. I think it's smart in the sense of like pulling the stuff from the Hollywood ride, because like I said, or like you said, it is definitely going to pull a lot of like at least the video clips from the Hollywood ride. I do wish that it had been something a little bit more new, like they did their own take on it. Because the King Kong ride, I never got to ride it back in the day, but like I've watched videos and I've heard you describe it multiple times, and it's like a weird combination. Like I think it's supposed to be mostly based on the '76 Kong, but the actual animatronic and stuff like that looks like the '33 Kong. So it is almost its own like.
I would disagree with that. No, I mean it's very specifically the '76.
Is it?
It's based off the '76 animatronic.
Oh, okay. I don't know. From what I remember seeing of it, it looked a little bit like the goofy grin '33 Kong.
No, it's pretty. It's pretty the serious, scary one.
Okay, but anyway, regardless, I would have liked them to do their own take, but I definitely see why they're doing just 2005's Kong.
It seems weird to me in general. I mean, I understand now that they're cashing in on the free marketing they're going to get from the new movie from Warner Brothers.
They really are.
But it's still like we're 16 years removed from Peter Jackson's King Kong now, and I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a later episode. But I I really loved that movie when it came out. A lot of people had a lot of problems with it,
Yeah.
but it was overly long. And again, the Skull Island stuff, besides some of the fights, is really boring. It's not why you go to... I mean, King Kong is... The reason you go and see King Kong is the same reason people went and saw King Kong in the movie. Him brought into the civilized world. It's basically the plot of Tarzan, except does a lot more damage.
I mean, I would agree, but also disagree with you. But we'll get to that when we get to that actual episode, because I don't want to go too deep dive into that.
We'll get to that when we talk about the 33 Kong.
Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the multiple iterations of Kong.
Just so the fans don't leave the podcast, I will say it's not Skull Island I have a problem with in general. The 33 version pulls off Skull Island way better and is way more interesting throughout. And I love the island natives and stuff, the 2005 Kong. It's just a lot of the action in the middle is just padded.
I will agree the action is padded, but yeah, I mean, I think that Skull Island is a really important part of the Kong mythos. I don't think, and I mean, and you can shoot me for this, but I think that's the one thing that's missing from 76 Kong. And that's why I don't like it as much as I do the other two.
There's a decent bit in the 76 Kong.
Yeah, he fights a giant snake. Woohoo. All right, anyway.
But again, just to reiterate, I love Skull Island and the elements of Skull Island. I think the 2005 version, it gets a little tedious at Skull Island.
But
because of what's in there.
Anyway, to get back to the ride, because I have a lot to say about the Skull Island in 2005's Kong, but once again, it's enough for a whole episode. So, and we got to get to War of the Gargantuas soon. So, I think that the ride, it definitely looks like it's going to be technically interesting, and I mean that is one thing that I've always liked about Universal is how their rides are like experiences instead of just being a ride. You know, they always have the stuff going on during the line, and you know,
they try to immerse you. Yeah, they
try to immerse you in the world, and I mean, I was there, like I said, last summer, and I actually did see them building the wall, and cool. It's really impressive, and it's right next to the Jurassic Park section too. So it's like you leave Jurassic Park and you end up like right on Skull Island. So it's kind of a really good position.
We posted 3 videos today to TokyoLivesPodcast.com, and one of the videos is just the animatronic big gate opening. And it's really cool. I mean, it's cool to see that in real life. Yeah,
and it's definitely something I will eventually want to ride. I don't live anywhere near Florida anymore, but at some point I'm sure I'll go back and I'll love the heck out of it. But the little last piece of news, we're not going to really talk about it too much because it's really kind of non-news. It's just some interesting stuff. My friend Coleman...
The Iron Giant on Blu-ray.
No, that's not it. My friend Coleman posted up some pictures from the Kong Skull Island set, keeping in the King Kong theme. There's just a couple like quick little images of the island. It's pretty interesting. Not really much
shows the village.
The village. That's what I mean. But there's not really much to really speak of that we can actually like deep dive into because there's really just like a few little images.
Well, you said you had seen it before, but I did think it was interesting that it had some tourists posing with one of the
with a jaw,
a lower jaw.
Yeah.
Lower jaw of a Kong or whatever species King Kong is. It had just a lower jaw of it, and you can already see that they're upping the size.
Just a little bit, yeah. It definitely looks from the jawbone. It looks more like the 33 Kong size, which was like 45 feet tall. So they're upping a little bit, but we're not talking up and to Godzilla size here. We're not talking 108 meters tall. We're talking.
This could be a young one. This could be.
It could be. It could be. We don't know. But that's why I don't really want to go into it too much because once again, it's just a couple images. We have no actual information to relate it to.
Well, jump over to TokyoLivesPodcast.com to see those. There's 5 images total, and then also the story on the
ride as well. Yeah.
King Kong ride just posted. You can see the images of the American Kaiju.
Mm-hmm.
These are all news articles I posted just today. So for all your monster news, I'd say TokyoLivesPodcast.com. I'm going to try to keep up with it and make that a pretty vibrant source.
Yep.
So,
but for now, let's jump on into our main topic.
Prehistoric monsters.
The monster will destroy us all. Monster will destroy us all.
Prehistoric monsters.
The monster.
This monster you've seen, you think your bombs will stop him?
So tonight we are talking about War of the Gargantuas.
Yes.
This is the 1966 class from Toho Pictures, the same production company that is responsible for Godzilla.
Yes.
And, funny enough, this is also the same director of 1954's Godzilla.
Yep. Ishiro Honda. He actually worked a lot for Toho. He did a lot of movies. Some good, some bad. Not talking about this movie, but he did some of the later 70s Godzillas, like I think his last movie that he ever directed for. No, that's not true. The last movie he ever directed for Toho was Terror of Mechagodzilla,
Which is pretty universally liked.
Yeah, but I mean before that, I think he actually was involved with Godzilla's Revenge. So But anyway, War of the Gargantuas. So it is a sequel, non-sequel to a movie that came out the year before it, which was Frankenstein Conquers the World or Frankenstein versus Baragon. It goes by a lot of different titles.
And this came out in 1965.
Right. So it's literally the year after. And Toho, I mean, that's what Toho did back in the day. They were pumping out these movies real quick. Like Godzilla movies, there's a couple of them that actually came out in the same year in Japan. It's kind of terrifying how quickly they were pumping these guys out.
And this is weird because, so like you said, it's a sequel, not sequel, and we thought about this.
Yes.
Before the episode started. Probably would have been pretty good content. But we thought about this because I had just watched the movie. I hadn't done the research yet. And I was determined to say that this was a straight sequel because I was so confused by the beginning elements where you have these characters talking about raising the sound, you have a flashback, you have all these things, and then the Japanese version specifically has its nomenclature in a weird place as far as what they call these things.
Yeah.
So all of this led me to believe that this was a direct sequel. Like, the last movie ended, and this one just started off from that.
Yeah.
And it's not true. This is a different, very. I mean, it shares a lot of elements with Frankenstein,
including some actors that are playing similar roles.
Yeah, and the director.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a sequel, non-sequel. It takes a lot of the elements from the original, and but then it just kind of runs off in its own direction, and then never references the original at all. So,
and I would say that this movie's place in history is, I think it's well known because of the director, obviously, him doing Godzilla and it being a Toho Pictures movie that isn't really part of the Godzilla universe.
Right.
Technically. And
until later, I suppose, but
yeah, and it's its own thing. It's its own movie with its own monsters. That it's Suitmation, but it's pretty much humans running around.
Yeah, it's very actually like you could actually argue this movie not be Suitmation technically, because I mean I gave my description of what Suitmation is last episode, and it has to be a guy in a costume that is his suit is being manipulated by outside puppeteers. And neither of these suits really are. I mean, because it's all like, basically it's a mask and they're emoting through the mask is all they're doing. But it does have its place in history, which is one of the big reasons why we wanted to talk about it. It's one of the more famous Toho films, surprisingly. This movie has a cult following.
It's pretty well received throughout the Kaiju fan base, right?
Yeah, it's surprisingly to my side of things. But I like I said, last episode I said I had never seen it ever. I had seen little clips from it. I had seen little things, but actually I realized while I was watching this movie, the only clip that I'd actually ever seen was the airport attack. And really, the only reason why I'd seen that clip is because of Godzilla Tokyo SOS. From the 2000s, because this movie is canon in that movie's universe. So they show a little clip from it, and I was like, oh, hey, it's War of the Gargantuas. But Sanda and Gaira, the two monsters, are very unique looking. So I'd seen them around years before I ever saw that other movie. So, but you said you saw this on TV like a long time ago?
Yeah, a long time ago. And it's funny, I actually had a very specific shot that I remembered. It was kind of like looking over a hill into the valley where Sanda was still, like trying to heal his brother or keep him safe after he got hurt by the military. And that shot never appeared in the movie on this rewatch. So I had probably taken a few shots and like combined them in my mind.
In your head, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I remember.
I'm pretty sure everyone has done that at some point with movies. Like you just, your brain makes up a fake memory.
Like I even remembered like the bad matte of combining the images.
Oh man, there's some bad matting in this movie.
Not as bad as I thought, though.
I mean, there's some good ones. There's okay. That's if we're starting off our talking about the movie, there is actually some really fantastic miniature work and some good mats in this movie. There's one shot in particular, and it actually does not involve a giant monster. But I actually was watching this with my wife, and I turned to her and said, "Wow, that is a really impressive shot." What it is it's a building. And there's cars driving towards it and people walking. And it's a really long, wide shot of this building. But the building is like a painting. The cars are stop motion, or at least little models. And the people walking, and once again, they're tiny little people walking. It's not like they're full in frame. They're just walking across, and those are actual real actors walking somewhere. So it's like the fact that they blended all three of those elements together so well in that one shot. I was really actually impressed by that, because even some of the bigger budget American movies weren't able to do stuff like that to such like. The only reason why I noticed the cars were not real was because I was, watching out for it, I suppose. So that shot really impressed me. But this movie.
Well, I do want to that point, talking about the special effects.
Sure.
It did try really hard to do a lot of the tricks that I think some modern movies are still pulling off, trying to hide CGI.
Yeah.
You had a lot of. They built it into the plot that one of the monsters you really only see at night.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah, they did. They tried to do that.
So a lot of the fights, a lot of the major fights and stuff were at night. You had fog. I think the best mat in the entire movie, the best combo of shots. There's two of them, but the best one is when they're in the forest.
Yeah,
and you see Sanda.
Yeah,
and it's just like you see the trees in the foreground. And you see Sanda standing behind them in the distance, covered by fog, and you actually have actors in the foreground. And because of the fog, they were able to do a near flawless combination of shots.
Yeah. I remember that shot.
It looks really,
now.
really good.
Yeah.
And the other one that I think was really good shows how much of thought went into this movie. The Mazers, not Mazers.
They're Mazers. They're Mazers.
The Mazers in the city at the end. There's one where it's a close up of the Mazer, and it lights up and fires. And instead of cutting to the monster getting hit, the camera swish pans around and zooms in on the monster getting hit without a cut.
I didn't see that one. I didn't notice that shot.
It's a matte, and it's a combination of shots, and it's really well done.
Yeah.
It's a very dynamic shot that is totally modern.
Yeah, and you wouldn't expect to see it in this type of movie. Yeah,
it was really interesting. So I think they really tried it. And to your point of miniatures, the miniature work was all great, all looking great. What I really appreciated with the miniatures were the destruction of the buildings. They broke down into pieces that looked like building pieces with wire sticking out, and like the way they broke down, it wasn't like cardboard pieces falling like it sometimes looks like. It really looked like rubble, and when the buildings were left standing after being hit, like I said, there was like jagged. It looked like World War II imagery.
Yeah, and it did. They definitely did that well with the breaking off of the pieces. Although I was surprised by the lack of actual destruction in this movie, but that's a point from when we're talking about the movie itself. There really wasn't as much city destroying as I thought there was going to be. I was actually kind of really surprised by that. Other than the very end of the film, there wasn't really much.
And a lot of it takes place in like the countryside.
Yeah, a lot of it's like near a lake or in the water. So it just surprised me. It just like I said, I'd never seen the movie before, so I kind of expected like this big full on battle in a city at the end, and it really wasn't as intensely destruction as I thought it was going to be.
No, and the last thing I'll say special effects wise that I also really appreciated more than I thought I would, and I didn't even see it coming. When the Gargantuas are getting hit with military.
Oh, yes. I know what you're going to say.
You don't see sparks. And this is 1966.
Yeah.
You don't see sparks. You don't see any kind of crazy explosions or anything. I mean, you see explosions like a shell, like a tank shell, the size of an explosion that it would hit this giant monster. But like their fur catches fire.
Yeah.
Like it's very realistic as far as like the damage to the monsters that I haven't seen in any other monster or movie of this era.
Yeah, no, I was definitely impressed by that as well. Specifically the battle damage. Like that was actually something that I was really
They tried to keep up.
They
with
tried
it. These
to
are
keep up
not
with it, like
healing monsters.
Yeah, they're not healing monsters. So like Gyra specifically, like he gets messed up by that first Mazer attack. So he's got wounds on him, and Asanda breaks his leg at some point, and the suit actor always is limping. And that was really impressive attention to detail for these two monsters, and I will definitely give the movie props on that side of things, because that was really impressive. The battle damage especially is something that Toho never really did in most of their other films. The Godzilla films, it's non-existent.
I see blood every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while, but it's very rare. I think to a certain extent they wanted to differentiate themselves from Gamera. And seeing as though Gamera didn't come out till I think 1969, that probably is why we see more blood in this movie, because Gamera hadn't even come out yet, so there's no reason to tone stuff back or do stuff differently.
Yeah.
But let's get your opinions on the movie itself first, as a whole, and then we'll go into a couple more specific things.
So, first off, I really enjoyed this movie. I'd seen it before, but I didn't really have an opinion on it before. It maybe helped in my enthusiasm with giant monsters as a kid, but because I was just watching anything. I was watching Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I was watching tons of things as a kid.
Right.
And, this is during the 90s, so everything was reruns on TV, and I had seen this at some point. But I was really going into it cold here. I mean, I love giant monsters. I can get into the older ones. I can get into the Showa era ones. That's really not a huge problem with me. But this podcast is not about just going over our kaiju fandom or our giant monster fandom and loving every single movie we see. So I was going to be really critical of this movie. I thought it was going to be early, but, I didn't know what to think. So I jumped into it, and I honestly thought the things I liked about this movie is that it had kind of like this horror movie element. The way things were shot, when you see like a shot from a boat looking through the water, and one of the Gargantuas is just under the water staring up at this boat before he takes it out. These kind of shots in the beginning opening scene at night, they're pretty terrifying. Not terrifying in the sense that I was sitting there scared or needing to stop the movie or anything. They weren't like jump scares, or they weren't even, I wouldn't even call them creepy. They were just horrifying in the sense of every giant monster movie has destruction, it has people dying, but these Gargantuas, or this specific Gargantua, was eating people in front of other people. He was the way he approached like the airport. I thought there was some very major horror elements to this film in a way that I haven't really seen in a giant monster movie, or very many at least. So I really enjoyed the movie for that kind of unique take on it. The fact that kaiju and giant monsters in general, you don't really see them cooperating in a communication sense. Like, you might see them working together and things, but besides some of the hokier movies, they don't ever really talk or have a relationship with each other. This one you do. These are, even though they're clones, or one's a clone.
They're both clones, or whatever they are.
Whatever. They're considered brothers, and Sanda at least tries to save him and help him out, and then he's turned on, and it's just, I really enjoyed that element. I thought that's really unique in Monster. That's my word of the day for this movie. It's really unique in a lot of ways. Yeah. And the last major thing that I really enjoyed with it was the clear danger of these creatures. I have my issues with some of the human characters, but the human plot I thought was more relevant to this one, because it's not just, there's a giant monster wrecking the city, that's why we need to destroy it. Yeah. Yes, they do want to stop them because of that, but specifically, even though Sanda, they convinced the humans, the professor and Akimi?
I watched the dub version, so it was like actually really awkward hearing him try and pronounce it, because he like pronounced it like Akami is how he pronounced it, like Akamy.
Sure.
But I don't know. It's Akemi is how it's spelled.
So the two human characters, though, I have more to say about them in a negative sense later. But the human plot in this, the scary thing with these Gargantuas, even though they convince the military that Sanda isn't a threat, the problem is that if either of these Gargantuas get damaged, or any tissue falls off them, or cells really, which is incredibly normal thing to happen with any living creature.
Yeah.
If any cells fall and combine with nature or something along those lines, another gargantua will sprout from that.
Yeah.
And this takes from the Frankenstein Conquers the World, where it was a radioactive heart that grew arms and legs and turned into a full creature.
Yeah.
These things can reproduce in the most horrible way possible, where any cell that falls off them or gets away from them can combine and turn into a whole nother gargantua.
Right.
So even though one of these gargantuas is a good guy, they both need to be taken out, and honestly, they need to be incinerated for us to be safe from them, and them not to wipe out the human race even by accident.
Yeah. All right. So I went into this movie pretty blind, like I said, and unfortunately, I walked away not really liking it. I mean, I liked parts of it. I liked some of the ideas, but I feel like this movie actually failed on the human level. And that's weird to say for a Toho film, because usually the human story isn't that interesting to begin with. This one actually, I feel like it needed more. Just to explain really what's going on. I know we haven't brought it up yet, but I mean, in both versions, the English and the Japanese version, they start throwing around these terms of Gargantua, and in the Japanese movie, they use Gargantua and Frankenstein. And no one questions it. Like, none of the military personnel, like, ask, what is that? What does that mean? It's just, everyone knows what that is. It's a Gargantua. Okay, cool. Moving on. And there's just, this movie goes from 0 to 60 in the first instant of the opening frame of the film. It's just a guy piloting a ship. All of a sudden he's attacked by a giant octopus out of nowhere. Then a Gargantua shows up, which is Gyra, the green one. And, he wrecks the boat, and then we're just off on this plot. And suddenly they introduce that these people have kept the brown one as a child, and it grew up and ran away from them, and they just never, it like just keeps going. It keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going, and they never actually get a second to take a breath to just explain what is actually going on in this movie. And they do explain some stuff. They do explain, like the cellular regeneration, although that is kind of actually just thrown out of nowhere. Like, suddenly they're just like, oh, by the way, Gyra is the same creature that we kept before, and it had to have grown somehow from the other one. Like, I would have liked to see that instead of, them just throwing around what happened, and we just kind of having to just nod and say, okay. This movie just doesn't give you a breath, and because it doesn't give you a breath, it's hard to, A, care about the characters, which, I have some negative things to say about the characters themselves. B, give an explanation for the monsters themselves. And while I did like the battle damage, I just want to point out that their plan to incinerate these monsters isn't going to work out so well when you just blew the crap out of them inside of a forest and obviously caused battle damage, which means some of these cells probably already are latching onto trees and are going to grow more gargantuas, apparently. There's like things like that.
Well, they said they were going to napalm the whole forest too.
Yeah, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's little plot holes like that. There's a lot of things. Like I said, I was disappointed by the lack of destruction in the film. To a certain extent, like I feel like that final battle in Tokyo could have been a little stronger. And I mentioned this to you earlier, and it did actually really bother me. Since these are basically just two guys in suits, like literally there's no special effects needed for them. I feel like they made the mistake that Godzilla Raids Again did, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more when we get to that movie, but essentially whenever you're filming a giant monster moving around a city, you usually lower the frame rate, or raise the frame rate? It's raise the frame rate, isn't it?
Raising the frame rate
would make it look slower.
Make it slow motion,
right?
Yes.
So you raise the frame rate to make these creatures look larger than they actually are, since it's just just a normal guy walking around some very detailed miniature work. I feel like during the fight, and there's a couple of scenes with Gyra early on, they didn't do that. So it kind of hurt me believing that this was a giant creature walking around.
Well, actually, so I looked out for that because you mentioned that we both know that Godzilla Raids Again did that by accident.
Yeah.
It hurt that film in a lot of places. I think this was on purpose.
You think? So, just to make it look like they move fast?
Well, no. So here's why I think they did it. I noticed, I was looking out for it because we had talked about that before we'd watched the movie. And when I was watching it, the times that I felt like it was going at normal speed, normal frames per second, which is 24. It might be 30 for Japan in that era, but
yeah, I don't know.
Either way, they slightly slow it down, so they probably go to like 48 frames per second to give that slight slow-mo look. I think when they went normal speed in this film on the giant monster suits, I think it's when they were a little closer, a little tighter, mostly during the fight scenes, and it was used sparingly. I honestly think it was because that effect is used because you're kind of thinking like human looking at these giant creatures and the speed they move. But if you were a giant creature, that would be normal speed to you. And I think during the fights, it's to put you like in the situation with the giant monsters.
I suppose.
I think it's intentional. Like, because you see at their speed what speed they're fighting at.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's just some really silly shots. Like the one that I really am thinking of, other than the fight scene, which you may be right about the fight scene, but the one that I really think of is whenever Gyra decides that, like, oh man, I'm getting out of here. Like when he's like running across the countryside, like super fast.
That's a little silly.
It looks a little silly. And then there's the airport attack, which I know you said you really liked, but there's the scene where he's first walking up to the airport looks really, really awkward. And I don't know if that's just
in the
because
water. I thought it looked awkward.
No,
I think once he got there, it was fine.
No, I think it's when he's like literally like walking like the Fonz is what I called it when I was watching it, because he has this like, I just jumped out of the bushes to scare you, like, walk to him the entire time. So as he's walking across this and it's in normal speed, he just looks really goofy. Like, you know, Godzilla has that, like, that stereotypical Godzilla pose where his arms are at his side, like, super close to his body. Mm-hmm. Well, this thing's arms are, like, out and above, like, at head level. His hands are, like, at head level. So it just looks really goofy. But anyway, I think this movie was an okay monster movie. I think it did have some really unique ideas. I did appreciate the battle damage. I liked the fact that the monster ate people as well. Gave some human interaction there. But I feel like it's not as strong as a full movie as some of the other spinoffs like Mothra and Rodan are. And I think I wouldn't. This isn't going to be one of my favorites that I'm going to go back and watch over and over again. For a lot of just little random things.
See, I like Mothra and Rodan, but I would actually put this above them. I think the pacing is very modern, which I appreciate, and I think that it just has so many elements that are unique in the giant monster genre. I think this kind of stands alone in the 60s and really just the early era of giant monster movies in general for taking itself seriously and pulling that off to an extent with these suits and this, and like I said, this era of filmmaking. I think it actually works, and I know the suits themselves don't look that great, and it is humans, and you know.
Well, that's the thing.
For the things that you have to believe in a lot of these movies, I can believe two bipedal humanoid-looking monsters because they look like humans, and I believe humans.
No, I can. That's not my problem with the suits themselves, and I did want to get to this at some point. I feel like the actual suits are actually kind of cool. Like, they have a lot of texture to them. Mm-hmm. It's the masks that make them not good. Sanda's is better than Gyra's. Gyra's just looks really goofy, and like he has like weird little Gamera tusks. I don't know if you noticed that on his bottom jaw.
And I think they tried to make these look like
demons, like Onis.
Yeah, like Japanese demon masks, like you'd see in like a theatrical Japanese production of the time, like a theater performance, except make them obviously look like monsters and more realistic. But I think they were going for that Japanese demon look.
I mean, I guess it just didn't work for me. I liked that the actors were able to emote with their eyes because, you know, it was just their eyes in the suit. It wasn't like King Kong's suit where it's just like these giant googly eyes. I liked that, and it really helped with Sanda because Sanda's, you know, the more sympathetic character. Like when Sanda shows up, which by the way is completely, I mean, it's warranted because in the movie they talk about it, but it's completely out of nowhere. There's no scene hinting that Sanda is heading down to the valley. There's nothing.
It's also kind of hard to tell when Sanda shows up.
Yeah.
Because it's dark, and at one point, one of them is hiding in the trees.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if that was like the Sanda reveal, because he looked kind of like brownish.
Yeah.
When he was, you couldn't tell when what Santa actually showed up. But,
yeah, it was very strange. The pacing of that. But I did like how when Santa was carrying Gyro away, it looked like, oh man, Gyro's had way too much to drink. I gotta take him home, guys.
I like how he looked back at I like how he looked back at the military.
Yeah.
And he was like, "You guys should be ashamed of yourself."
Yeah, and then carried him away. I did like that scene. I don't know. The characterization of the monsters was actually pretty strong, so I will give it that. Or at least Santa. Santa had characterization. Gyra,
here's another thing I really liked,
actually.
Was the fact that the military wasn't useless. They did some damage. Yeah. They corralled these monsters.
Yeah.
They were actually a big part of the movie. It was pretty different from normal monster films.
They still did the stereotypical, all right, we're not going to listen to you scientists after a certain point. Oh, you failed us once. Why should we believe you again? And then they go off.
They did turn on them in the middle of the movie, but at the end, they believed him that Santa was... he hung up the phone at that one point and stopped listening to him, and then they attacked both of them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the movie, the professor convinced them that Santa was good. And they were willing to change their tactics because of it.
True, but, I don't know. It just still... That's like a little stereotypical thing that the military did. But they were much more useful than, say, in any Godzilla movie that I've seen since, I guess even the original was very limited on what the military was able to do.
So I want to talk about two more main things, and then we can kind of wrap this up and give our final thoughts.
Yeah.
But firstly, I did have something that I didn't like about this movie, and it was pretty prominent. The two main characters, specifically the professor, not the older Japanese professor, but the American.
Yeah.
First off, this movie totally caters to American audiences.
Absolutely.
100%. We'll talk about that more in a second. But the professor, the main American lead, I'd say the lead of the movie, the man, he came off as evil to me. As an actual, villain.
Yeah.
Maybe not evil's a little strong, but at every corner, he wanted to save one of these monsters. These monsters that the movie has told us over and over again that if they're basically like gremlins. If anything comes off of them, they'll reproduce and literally could wipe us out as a human race because they're taller and bigger and could be evil. But he wants to keep Santa for scientific research throughout the entire movie. He never gives up on that.
He never does. No.
At the very end, he's still fighting for them to save Santa.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous. Honestly, his lines and what he was saying, his motivations, they came off, maybe he was pleasant and charming. What he was actually trying to do came off to me as very scummy and selfish, and I don't honestly know what his end game was, but it was very Lex Luthor-ish.
Yeah. He came off as really awkward. And like I said, I watched the American version, which is... It's an interesting little tidbit about the American dub that came out in 1970, is that he actually had to come back and redub all of his lines because they weren't allowed to say the word Frankenstein. So all the lines that he had to say Frankensteins in the Japanese version, they had to cut it out and make him say Gargantuas. But he just seemed very, off-putting. And there's been, the guy from Monster Zero, I believe his name is Nick Adams, he had a very good charisma to him, and he seemed to actually be acting with the Japanese actors that he was interacting with, whereas this guy doesn't really seem like he's acting with the Japanese actors. You could almost just, he's basically from another film, and just kind of tossed in there, and just okay, you're talking about this monster now, and he's like, well, okay, monster, all right, I gotta keep this monster safe.
Yeah. Well, that was actually... What you just brought up is the other thing I want to talk about, is the fact that we didn't make it clear at the beginning of this episode.
Right.
And it could very well inform our audience on our opinions. I don't know. We should have said this at the beginning, but Kyle, you had seen the American dubbed version.
Right.
And I had watched the subtitled Japanese version.
Right.
So from what it looks like, there's not a ton of differences. But, there could be a tonal difference or a few things lost in translation.
Yeah, and we tried to catch up on our notes with each other before we started tonight, just to make sure. And I had done research after I watched it last night, and literally, there's just a few scenes that Russ Tamlin's character was not in the Japanese version that he was in the American version. Is pretty much the big difference, other than the monsters never getting named as Sonda and Gyra in the American version. They're called Green Gargantua and Brown Gargantua.
Honestly, that's kind of awkward in the Japanese version because they're like, it's over a military call. They're talking about seeing the Gargantuas for the first time.
Yeah.
And they're like, by the way, we're going to be calling these Sanda and Gyra for the rest of the time. They literally say that.
Well, what's funny is like they've already in the American version they're calling them Green Gargantua and Brown Gargantua already, and then there's that same military call where they say, "All right, from now on we're calling them Green Gargantua and Brown Gargantua," and it's like, well, you've already been calling them that. I don't need that information, movie. Like,
and besides a musical choice it's at the end, right?
Yeah, it's during the fight. They randomly pull some music from Monster Zero.
Is it during the fight in the city or in the ocean?
It's during the fight in the city. It's just the most awkward thing in the world.
You still got the sad, melancholy music over the ending, right?
Yeah. Okay. Other than that, the only thing that was removed and replaced music-wise was a military march. Earlier in the film, they just used a song from an American film. That's
the military march was very Godzilla.
No, I mean, if Ikube does really good military marches, so. But
anyway, the point of what we were talking about just a second ago, before we moved into this, the biggest difference is, like we've been talking about throughout this episode, is that in the Japanese version, they very strangely talk about these Frankensteins. And I know this is kind of a reference to Frankenstein Conquers the World, or I'm not sure, but they talk about Frankensteins as if they're like, as if it's like Godzilla's name, like these Frankensteins that are running around, or as if it's a common thing that all Japanese people know about, that there might be a Frankenstein in the wild. And they switch off between Frankenstein and Gargantuas in the Japanese version, where I think, as you said, the American version just calls them Gargantuas, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very strange at the beginning of the movie when this guy's like, I saw a Frankenstein. And I don't know what that means. The only thing I can figure, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, write us in, leave a comment on the website. The only thing I can think of is that there is a Japanese word that they keep using that's not Gargantuas. I didn't pick it up in my watch, but they must be using a Japanese word that for some reason they couldn't think of anything else to translate it to but Frankenstein. Because I don't think that they're saying Frankenstein. I think they're saying something else. And so let us know if you know more than we do. I thought that was particularly weird, and maybe they were trying to do something. I don't know what they were trying to do by calling it Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's very strange. Like I said it towards the beginning of my talking about the movie, but like they do just kind of like throw the name Frankenstein and Gargantua out at you. And like we're supposed to already know what that means.
Yeah, like it's a type of creature. That they know about. It's
just very strange. So I just found a little tidbit that is actually really interesting. Remember how we were talking about how this is like a sequel, non-sequel? Mm-hmm. Apparently, the alternate ending for Frankenstein versus Baragon, Frankenstein gets dragged into the ocean by the giant octopus and supposedly dies. Which would lead more into the beginning of this movie with the giant octopus showing up and then Gyra shows up and kills it. Like...
That would make sense because some of the dialogue in the Japanese version where they specifically talked about like, oh, we're not going to call this a father and son relationship. It's more like clones or brother. They say father
talk about that
son
for a second,
yeah. So really, if you do see this as a direct sequel, it's almost as if it's like, he was hurt in the final volcano explosion or whatever, the last movie, and that's where Gyra comes from, and and that this is just a direct sequel, just with different effects. I don't know.
It's a very strange. I would love to know the actual full story behind the film. I don't think anybody knows it though. From all my research, I couldn't find anybody that really went into why they didn't make it just a sequel and why they did what they did. But
it is strange to me that the only way to kill these things, it seems, even though the military was pretty effective against them with their weapons, these things keep getting killed by volcanoes.
Yeah, that's actually funny too, is the ending. How convenient that they ended up right next to a underwater volcano that erupts because of the bombs going off and kills the two Gargantuas in the only way that it can be killed. Very Very
Hey, that's
convenient.
actually 100% possible.
I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it's convenient.
No, I'm saying like bombing tests in the Pacific
Right.
actually caused a lot of volcanoes to sprout up.
No. I'm not talking about the bombs causing the volcano. I'm talking about the fact that they ended up in a place that was so unstable that the bombs being dropped from the planes to try and destroy the Gargantuas caused
You
a
mean
volcano
the
to go off.
entire Ring of Fire Pacific Rim?
I mean, I guess it just seems a little strange. I mean, they couldn't have gotten that far from Tokyo, like whenever they were swimming. It just seems a little odd.
And we knew it was Tokyo because of all the neon signs that
Oh
say
yes,
Tokyo.
they make sure to show you all the neon signs outside their windows that say Tokyo in big American letters.
Granted, during that ending, even though the ending's a little, like you said, it's a little convenient, it's a little Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
But I did find it pretty poignant that, one of these Gargantuas was good, and they're fighting at the very end. They dragged each other out to sea, and they're fighting to the death, and even being burned alive by a volcano doesn't stop them. It's and the music that's playing, it's a little poignant. It's a little sad as it happens.
Okay, it is a little poignant, but it didn't knock it out of the park for me because I feel like one of the things in the original Godzilla is even though at the end of the film Godzilla is you want them to defeat Godzilla like he's a horrible thing. Whenever they do the oxygen destroyer at the end, you get there's that sad feeling that you get even though like you've seen this monster do all this crazy stuff and you saw someone die, which I don't want to really spoil it, but it's from the 50s, so I guess I can say it. But like in this movie, I think the difference is in that movie, the human characters, all the human characters that we've been following up to that point were right there when it was happening. Like in this movie, the Gargantuas swim out to sea and like the human characters are still in Tokyo. And then there's just that one scene at the end with the chick waking up and going, "Is Sando okay?" And he goes, No, he was destroyed as well. And it's just like, it's not, it did, like if they were there watching it and she was horrified by seeing the one good one die alongside the one bad one, like that would have been poignant to me. But the fact that they were so disconnected from what was going on, it didn't hit me. I didn't get teary eyed. I didn't get anything about it. I had really no emotion with the ending. I was just like, oh, well, I guess they're dying because of a volcano. All right. That's how it's ending.
Those are perfectly valid points. I won't take those away from you. Those do make sense, and I think are 100% easy things to point out in this movie as being faults. To sum up my thoughts, I just really find this movie really unique and ahead of its time a little bit. I think it was incredibly thoughtful, the work and the time and the effort that went into this movie. You can tell in every frame that there was thought put behind it, even when it doesn't work. I personally, I see why this stands up, why people really hold it up as something to go back to when most of the time people just go back to Godzilla or King Kong in that era or, a lot of the Atomic Age movies just for fun.
Yeah.
I don't think this is just to go back to make fun of it. I think this movie really works and has some, I wouldn't call them pacing issues. I would say some modern editing techniques to it. But personally, I think this is a great balance between you always have these stories with the giant monster movies where scientists are against the military or back and forth. I think this balanced that really well. You had the scientists working with the military, but then there's falling out. I think it has a good 3-act structure. We get plenty of monster battles and the monsters working together. And I mean, this really covered the bases for me with a giant monster movie and what I want out of them. So I really came away really enjoying this film, not just for what it is or for the time period. I really liked it. Yeah. So I mean that's just my thoughts in general.
Yeah, I mean I just like I said I really kind of did go into this blank slate. I already said that earlier, but it's just kind of I did walk away I wouldn't even say disappointed because I really didn't have any expectations at all. I just came away from it going, well, that was a monster movie. I mean, yes, there are some really neat elements, and yes, it did definitely seem like there was a lot of thought behind a lot of stuff that they did, especially with the special effects. But I feel like the human characters were lacking, and not only were they lacking, the fact is like I said earlier, we needed more of an explanation of what actually was going on in this film. And because of those two things alone, the movie kind of falls apart, and it becomes basically just all these monster scenes thrown together. And usually, like, you know, I'm all for that, but for some reason, because I didn't have any idea, no concept of what was actually going on, what these monsters were actually doing, why Gyro was evil until later on in the film, I didn't know what was going on. And that is not a good feeling to have. And you may say it's not pacing issues. You say it's modern editing. You're kind of right. I just feel like the fact is that even modern films know when to slow down and when to keep going. And this movie did not know how to do that. I don't think I'll ever go watch it again. I mean, you know, if for instance it came on TV and there's nothing better on, I may watch it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to put it in when I could put in a Godzilla film or one of my other favorite monster movies. So, yeah, those are kind of my ending thoughts on it. I would say it's still worth a watch, though. If you're a giant monster fan, it's definitely one of those classics that you should form your own opinion on, because it definitely has those classic elements that, you know, make or break giant monster movies. So
I think it does inform a lot of later movies.
Yeah.
You can see them pulling from this, not all.
Oh, yeah.
This.
No,
especially with some team-up films and some other movies that have the monsters working together and things like that.
No, even non-monster movies. Did you know that Quentin Tarantino in Kill Bill Volume 2, he wanted the final fight between Uma Thurman and Daryl to be based on War of the Gargantuas fight. In fact, on set, they called it the War of the Blonde Gargantuas, is what they called it.
That's amazing.
So, like, it definitely informed on a lot of things, and lots of things have made reference to this movie. Like I said, it's definitely worth watching. As much as I didn't enjoy it as much as you did, it's worth a watch. So, but that pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. I think we already mentioned it before, but if we haven't, the next episode is going to be about Pacific Rim. We're going to go into why Del Toro did Pacific Rim, the impact of Pacific Rim, and just in general, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what we expect to see in a sequel, or hope to see in a sequel, or don't want in sequels. So,
I'm really excited to watch this. My wife is actually really excited to watch it again, too. I think that says a lot about this film. I think it hit a lot of people. It was a very nerdy film. It was a very, very kaiju fan favorite film as far as, like, you know, making references and living up to the history of kaiju films. And yet it hit with the general audience pretty hard. It
did. Yeah. And I actually, right now, one of my coworkers had never seen it. And she's a big Del Toro fan. And I was like, what do you mean you've never seen Pacific Rim? And so I let her borrow it. And she hasn't gotten a chance to start it yet. She saw the first 5 minutes of it and said she thinks she's going to like it because of the style. I mean, a lot of people at work that I've spoken to about it really liked the film. And we'll talk a bit about what we like and what we didn't like when we get to the episode. But I mean, it did hit with an audience, and it was kind of a prepper for Godzilla 2014 as well.
I think it was a prepper for a lot of giant monster films.
It kind of was the first giant monster movie that came out in America in a really long time, at least for a wide theatrical release. So it's definitely a big impact.
So that's next week. We're excited to talk about that. Or next episode. we'll tell you when it's coming. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you haven't, go check out War of the Gargantuas. Both of us would recommend that.
Yep.
And then come back and listen to this again.
Yeah, because we did spoil things pretty hard. So
we did. If you haven't, jump on iTunes, leave us a review or a rating. That really helps out the show and gets us out to a broader audience.
Yep.
If you also jump on TokyoLivesPodcast.com. I really think that's going to be a source for a lot of news, my comments, my commentary, essays, whatever I feel like posting, but I can guarantee it'll be giant monster related. And I'd love to see some people starting to really get into conversations and discussions on there, like a few people have already started doing. If you don't want to go to the main's website, we have Twitter, we have Facebook. Jump on wherever you can, and we'll be there to get you some giant monster related content alongside these episodes.
Absolutely. Alrighty, guys. Well, my name's Kyle.
And I'm Coleman.
And we'll see you next time.